things that I love about my job is that I get to travel all over the world and visit with cultural institutions that use Tessitura. I've been to hundreds of organizations and met with literally thousands of individuals who make the world's cultural institutions tick. And from this kind of unique vantage point, I've seen some stunning patterns of success. And so today I want to share with you a couple of really big things that thriving cultural organizations seem to get right. But first I want to tell you a story. It was fall of 2012, and I was planning a trip to Wisconsin to see many of our Tessitura users there. And I was on the phone with Matt Hilgers. Many of you know Matt. He works for the network, and he lives in Milwaukee. And towards the end of the call, I mentioned to him that I was planning to go see the Art Center in Sheboygan. And he said, "Oh, the Art Center in Sheboygan, you'll love it. It's a fantastic place. And for God's sake, whatever you do while you're there, don't forget to go to the bathroom." Of all the things that Matt could have said to me right at that point. Not what I was expecting. So the Art Center in Sheboygan is pretty fantastic. I went there with my colleague Marty. And it's a state-of-the-art museum, beautiful performing space, education center, all wrapped around a famous historic house. And I have to say boldly and without apology, it was the most amazing bathroom experience of my life. You see, the Art Center in Sheboygan is the John Michael Kohler Art Center. Maybe you know that name, Kohler. The Kohler Company is based just outside of Sheboygan. They're world famous for their plumbing fixtures and their ceramics, among other things. And the Kohler Foundation commissioned the world's leading ceramic artists to design the bathrooms of the Kohler Art Center to amazing effect. So yes, if you're ever in Sheboygan, go to the Kohler Art Center, and for God's sake, go to the bathroom. They call them washrooms. And while you're there, check out their literally world-famous arts industrial exhibits, their incredible performances, or their community outreach. It's a real gem. So why am I standing up here talking to you about the washrooms in Sheboygan? I'll tell you. Because before I talk about what you can do to be more effective at your organizations, I think it's important to start with the why. The author Simon Sinek has quite famously said about people in professional life that most people understand what they do and how they do it, but they don't understand why. To me, the Kohler Art Center, this dynamic art center in a smaller community, Sheboygan is only 50,000, serving 160,000 international clientele every year, and their art goes to every nook and cranny of their being, right all the way down to the washrooms, is amazing. It is amazing what we can accomplish in this world. And like your colleagues at the Kohler Art Center, at each of your organizations, you are doing amazing and unique things every single day and bringing that to the world. I'll say this another way. Etched into the side of the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., another Tessitura organization, by the way, are these famous words by President Kennedy. "I am certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over our cities, we too will be remembered not for our victories or defeats in battle or in politics, but for our contribution to the human spirit." We're much more likely to wrap ourselves in the language of Shakespeare than to remember the intrigues of Elizabeth I. We are much more likely to gaze upon the beautiful House of Parliament paintings by Monet than to remember what was going on inside that building when he painted them. From the legends of King Arthur to Tristan and Isolde to Spamalot. From the Roman baths of Caracalla to the washrooms of Sheboygan. We too, in this age, will be remembered for our contribution to the human spirit, and I truly believe that everyone in this room has the opportunity to play a part in that. which is great. Let me tell you why I think that. Let me break it down for you. See, in my mind, there's the culture that's being created in the world today, every day. And there are the people whose lives are transformed by that culture. But bringing them together, binding them together, is us, the professionals in this world who dedicate their lives to connecting people with culture. Next time you're at a party, so what do? I connect people with culture. That's right. Which is fantastic. But here's the hard part, because there is a hard part. This business of arts and culture, it's not easy. I hear it again and again. I travel all over the world and I hear it. The audience attention spans are getting shorter. The funding is getting scarcer and scarcer. No, this is not for the faint of heart. So to recap, our age will be remembered for our contribution to the human spirit. Everybody in this room can play a part in that, but it's not easy. It's not easy, but it is eminently possible. I know it because I have seen it. Again and again, as I travel across the world and I meet with your organizations, I've seen it. So today I want to talk about 3 big things that I've seen thriving cultural organizations get right again and again. And they track along the 3 words on this circle. And the first one is culture. Again and again, when I go to an organization and I see they're really thriving, I see that the staff at all levels of that organization subscribe to this single, simple principle. They live in the culture of their organization. Well, what does that mean? Let me tell you about my friend Jerry. Jerry is a high-level IT project manager. He works for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And I saw him not long ago. I was there. They're a Tessitura organization, and he was so excited. He was telling me about the Gary Winograd exhibition at the Met. And art people, you might have to explain Gary Winograd to the others. I didn't. And so he was asking me about it, and so I was really interested. I said, "So you're IT guy. You go to the exhibits a lot, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah, I love them." He said, I'm busy. Everybody's busy. I don't have a lot of time, but what I do is during lunch, I'll take like 15 minutes and I'll sort of sneak up to the museum, and for 15 minutes, I'll look at an exhibit. Sometimes just 3 or 4 paintings, and the next day I'll come back and I'll see the next couple of paintings, and the next day. Takes Jerry, sometimes it takes him a month to get through an entire exhibit. He does it 15 minutes at a time. And I asked him, why that was important to him, and he had such a great answer. He said that first and foremost, it was reminding him of their mission, of why they do what they do. Jerry knows his why. And on a more practical level, he said, it helps me be better at serving my internal constituents, helps me understand their vernacular. And maybe most importantly of all, it gives you pride in what you do when you live in the culture. So whether it's the marketing appeal or the passion of the fundraising speech, it gives you that pride. And Jerry has a lot to be proud of. The Met is an amazing, amazing organization, although while they're tops in lots of things, I have to say there's at least one place where they may not be the best in the world. I was there a few weeks ago, and while nice, I got some looks when I took that picture. So I told you that story, so I can tell you this story. Travel with me now across the Atlantic, up through the North Sea to the remote and tiny Shetland Islands. I was there a couple of years ago, right after the opening of a new performing arts center there that was using Tessitura. Performing Arts Center is called Mariel, and I was there to visit with their customer care director and her staff, Amy Jenner. First thing I said when I got there, I said, Mariel, it's a neat name, but what does it mean? Is that like a sponsor, or is that the name of a major donor? And she said, no, she laughed. She said, no, Mariel, it's a Shetland word, and it means bioluminescent plankton. Science center people, you might have to explain bioluminescent plankton to the others. She told me about the culture, this really unique culture, obviously a very remote place very long winters. They have an incredible musical culture in Shetland. Everybody there plays an instrument. She told me that some of the kids, by the time they're in their teens, most of them are actually quite proficient at 3 or 4 instruments. But they never had a modern musical facility until Mariel. And now they have modern musical facility, recording facilities, music education facilities. And when I talked to them, I could see it in their eyes, and I could hear it in their voices, that pride. They were living the Shetland culture. They live the culture of their organization. So I'm going to require some math now. For each of the big 3 things that I'm talking about, I would like for you to give yourself a score. And the first thing on the scorecard today is this. How well do you live in the culture of your organization? A 1 is you're totally checked out, and a 5 is you're completely immersed. And I'd say if you're less than a 4 or a 5, there's some room for improvement, which is not a diss or anything. I've totally been there. Right out of college, I worked for Carnegie Hall, an amazing institution, Tessitura user. First year at Carnegie, I went to 3 or 4 performances a week. My last year, 8 years in, last year at Carnegie, I went to 1 performance for that entire year. It happens. You get complacent. You forget. All I'm suggesting is break the complacency. Go see a show, sneak into a dress rehearsal, wander through an exhibit, even if it's just 15 minutes at a time. It's better for you. It's better for your organization. It will help you contribute to the human spirit of our time. Now, I think we will all agree that our era will be remembered for the great culture that we bring to it, but it will also be remembered for the massive leaps in technology. Massive leaps in technology. I mean, this is the information age, they keep telling us. And as it happens, this is the second big thing, that when I am on my travels, I see really thriving cultural organizations get right. They embrace the technology. Number 1 thing that I hear when I go and visit organizations and just sit down and say, how are things going? They always say this. They say, we love Tessitura, and we could be using it more. Just fair. I mean, it's this very robust platform. There's a lot in there. I get that. But I think maybe there's a misconception that if you aren't doing kind of the crazy Google Glass, hologram, proximity technology, all that stuff, that you're not truly embracing the technology. And some of you really are doing all that cool stuff. But what I've seen again and again, fundamentally, is that really thriving cultural organizations use the basic fundamental tools of Tessitura, of their technology. And so in order to illuminate this a bit more for you, we are going to travel now to Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia. And we are going to visit, thank you. We're going to visit the small but mighty Shakespeare Tavern. Every single member of the staff is here today. Some of them are here. And I was there a few months ago with my colleague Barbara, and we visited with Jeff Watkins, who's their artistic director. He's here today, and some of his team. And we had a wide-ranging conversation. We talked about the first folios and all these wonderful things. But on the topic of embracing the technology, I clearly remember this. Now, the Shakespeare Tavern is a wonderful place. It's a performing stage, but it's also a tavern. It really is a tavern, and it has tables, and they serve food and all of that. Jeff is a really, really hands-on artistic director. He goes to nearly every single performance. And just before he walks in to kind of work the room and go around the tables, he pulls a report out of Tessitura, of course. And it tells him everyone who's there and which ones are donors and how much they've given and other sort of details about them. And he scans it because he knows most of his donors. He's got thousands of them, but he knows them. But it just helps. It's a kind of a multiplier, if you will. It reminds him of who's there and that sort of thing. And I've said that all sort of took this long to say it. He said it in a much more succinct way. He said, Andrew, it's as simple as this. If I remember their name, they will give me more money. And if Jeff can embrace the technology to raise more money, then he can bring more Shakespeare to Atlanta, and he can help contribute to the human spirit of our time. And there are so many wonderful examples of this as I go around the world. And like our friends in Sheboygan at the Kohler Art Center, where they're using the geographic mapping technology that we've got in T-Stats to find sort of pockets of underserved areas based on their visitorship so that they can target outreach to those areas. You know, to the San Francisco Ballet and others who are selling tickets on Facebook so that they can, find new channels and find new audiences. Tons and tons of examples. So this is the next one on your scorecard. How well do you embrace the technology? Now, the Shakespeare Tavern, they may not get onto the cover of Wired magazine for their use of technology necessarily. But in my book, they're a solid 5 on embracing the technology. Now, of course, technology is, as often said, it's a tool, it's a means to an end. And sort of by my thinking, the end is connecting people with culture. That's the goal. And that brings us then to the third big thing, the people. The third big thing that I see thriving cultural organizations get right. And people for you may be audiences or visitors or guests, members, donors, students. I'm going to use audience generically. What I see cultural organizations that are thriving get, more often than not, is they have a relentless focus on putting the audience first. Which may sound a little like a chestnut, but it's an important chestnut because when I talk to folks and when I go and meet folks, this is unbelievably difficult. Putting the audience first is not easy. It is much easier to think about the needs of the organization first before you think about the audience. And what I've seen at the really thriving organizations is that they seem to always do this relentlessly. And to give you sort of a nice story of an organization that does this, we now have to travel to Seattle, to the Seattle Repertory Theater. Thank you, Heather. They, a couple years ago, just like everybody else in the room, pretty hard times. And their board came to the staff and they said, you guys need to think differently about this business. And they gave them that challenge. And the staff took that away and they took it to heart. And all they kept thinking about is that we need to put the audience first, in their vernacular, the patron first. And as a result of that, they did something kind of fantastic and a bit revolutionary. They took the arts departmental structure and they kind of flipped it on its head. And so they took the folks who were doing outbound telemarketing and telefundraising, and they took the folks that were doing the inbound subscriptions and ticket sales, and they took the folks that were doing annual fund and the ones that were doing membership, and they pulled them out of all of those departments. And they mashed them together into a brand new department called the Patron Services Office, with a mandate to put their audience first, to put their patrons first. And not long ago, I had the opportunity to meet with a number of members of the Patron Services Office, some of who are here today, Lexi, Sarah Jo, Katie, Beth, and Janet. And they regaled me with stories about their patrons and how happy they were because they had sort of this one-stop shop, kind of a personal concierge where they could call up and renew their subscription or exchange a ticket or make a donation, get restaurant recommendations or questions about parking. And this may just seem like good business practice, but even better than good business practice, after 3 years, the Patron Service Office has seen significant increase in donations, better retention of their subscribers. It's good news. It's good news for the Seattle rep. So what's your score? Because I would say, putting audience first, the Patron Services Office, they're a total 5. So what's your score? With every meeting, with every decision, with every communication, are you remembering to put your audience first? Let's actually stick in Seattle for a second. So as we were talking, I learned that every single one of them has 500 or more patrons that they are personally responsible for. 500 or more. How do you suppose they keep track of all of them? Yeah, they embrace the technology, of course. They use Tessitura. They use the portfolios feature in Tessitura so that when someone calls up, you know the last thing that they bought, you know what's coming up for them, you know their interests, you know the discussions that have been had before. Yeah, they embrace the technology. So once again, Seattle rep, embrace the technology of 5. And here's the best part. So we were talking. And I said, so do they ever call up and ask you about the plays and the actors and stuff like that? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I said, so how do you deal with that? Do you go see the plays? And they looked at me like I was just a jerk. And they said boldly and unapologetically, Andrew, quit being a jerk. Of course we go see the plays. We go to the first previews, and before that, we've been at the rehearsals. Some of them. Before that, sometimes we sit in on the readings. Before that, we read every single script. In fact, I learned later that the entire staff of the Seattle Rep is mandated to read all the scripts of the season. You see where I'm going here. They live in the culture of their organization. Once again, a 5. So there's an audience first, a 5, embrace the technology, a 5, live in the culture, a 5. They are a perfect 15, the Patron Services Office at Seattle Rep, a perfect 15. They are a triple threat. Musical theater people will have to explain triple threat to the others. So what's your score? Do you live in the culture like Jerry at the Met? Do you embrace the technology like Jeff at the Shakespeare Tavern? Do you put the audience first like the folks at the Patron Services Office? And you know, by my math, by the way, the opposite of a 15 would be a 3. Don't be a 3. A 3. Has anyone ever met a 3? They kind of don't care about the culture, they fight with the technology, they hate the customer. We all have. They will not be contributing to the human spirit of our time. Don't be a 3. Strive to be a 15. And here's why. On my most recent trip, I visited 11 organizations in 3 days. They were all different, and they were all wonderful in their own way, magical. Visited a ballet, an opera, a theater, a museum, all in 3 days. As my plane was taking off, my tray table was in its upright and locked position. So was I. I closed my eyes, and I thought back through all 11. And then sort of like this weird cosmic pinball machine kind of went off in my head, and I started pinging all the different places that I visited with the Tessitura Network. I went back to Sheboygan, and I went to the Shetland Islands, and the Met, Carnegie Hall in New York, and the Kennedy Center, and the Shakespeare Tavern, Seattle Rep, Sydney Opera House, Texas Ballet Theater. And I kept pinging on this cosmic pinball machine, and then it started ringing up numbers, hundreds, thousands, millions, and millions of lives that are changed and transformed for the better because our organizations exist. And these pillars of culture, large and small, wouldn't exist without you. And the people wouldn't be connected to that culture without you. And the students wouldn't have their minds opened to new worlds without you, without us. The people, the men and women who wake up every morning, passionately devote themselves to connecting people with culture. So I'm going to leave you with this. This business, it is not always easy. In fact, it's often really hard. But the world needs us. So all I'm suggesting is that you live in the culture. You embrace the technology. You remember to put the audience first. You get your score to 15, and you thrive. So that the next time you're at a party and someone asks, so what do? You can say, I help contribute to the human spirit of our time. Thank you.